Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. How are you doing today, Nora?
Very well, thank you.
Very good.
It's a little warm over here, but it's hopefully cooling down this week. We're not over 100 today. That's a good blessing.
Oh, see, we got it though. We are over 100. Yesterday was the first time in 7 years, I think they said the DC was over 100 degrees, and I don't mind the heat, so for me it wasn't a big deal, but a lot of people were walking around or coming in complaining, and of course our AC systems are taxed to the max, and it's like, well, It is summertime, and things have changed, whether we like it or not. Things have changed, so it's not like it was when we were kids.
No.
I want to take a detour today a little bit. We normally talk about the body. We normally talk about things of that nature. You and I have been in the fitness industry for many years, and we both started around the same time. I got into it 92, 93-ish. So we've approximately been within a few years of each other in the industry for the same amount of time. So I think we both also come from a place that you're a little bit more Pilates land, I'm a little more fitness land, and we've seen a lot of things come and go. And I just got back from a major conference on the West Coast, and I thought, you know what? Why don't we do a state of the industry? Why don't we try and do a where is the industry going? Where are we now? Because I find it fascinating that after the pandemic, things, they're starting to feel the same, but they're very different at the same time. So I thought, why don't we talk about that and see where we're going? Because if we had this conversation a year ago, I think our answers would be much different than they are today.
Things have changed so much. Again, since Brian and I were talking about this topic, I was just looking at a bunch of articles and sort of getting a feel of the pulse. And things have changed so radically, pandemic to post-pandemic, pre-pandemic. It's just the last 5 years have been an absolute roller coaster in every aspect of the fitness industry. Some things get better, some things get worse. And you're just at Idea World, which is a good representative, I think, to some extent, of a large portion of the fitness world. So Brian, was any key takeaways from being at that conference that you want to bring up?
This year, you and I have been doing Idea Worlds for years, and they always sort of touted how many thousands of people would show up. I know people pad numbers, I get it. But, I always told people, they say 5,000. I don't know if it was that many, but my classes that, could hold 100, 150 people, we were maxing out. We were having huge classes, and they were great. Class sizes seem to be coming down. The entire conference was smaller. Now, last year was the first big conference back, and it had a lot. I feel that the energy was a little higher last year, but the numbers, I think people were just so excited to be out of the house. But this year feels a little bit less. The trade show was a lot smaller, or it felt a lot smaller than it had been in previous years. What I found was that you had the large companies, where you'd have your TRXs, you'd have your Balanced Bodies, you'd have your, the larger companies have larger booths. And then you'd have a lot of these nobody companies having these teeny tiny booths. And, some companies that just hit every single trade show that there is known to man, and they're just trying to sell their wares. But there didn't seem to be that middle of the road. There weren't a whole lot of companies that were new. There were a few new concepts here and there, and I'm always trying to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to that sort of thing to bring back to my clients. I got to say, I would normally spend, quite a bit of money doing this, and I spent very, very little because I didn't need to. There was nothing that caught my attention. Nothing new, nothing outside the box. A lot of the same take on, well, here's a kettlebell that you can, that has this, or that it's shaped like that, or that and it's like, okay, but it's still the same device. And I don't know, 5, 7 years ago, there was a lot of newness. There were a lot of companies trying new things and bringing out new inventions that were very cool. They'd be like, oh, wow, that's awesome. There wasn't a lot of awesome this year. And the classes
So,
were small.
yeah. Uh-huh.
I took only a couple of classes and I expected them to be bigger and they were 12 or 14 people, where I expected
Oh,
them to be
that's
a
small.
lot larger. My classes filled up. I had 70 plus in each of my classes, but the anatomy in 3D usually does very, very well. So, my classes were very full. But in general, it wasn't the same as usual. So it didn't have that same energy.
I've never seen idea classes with 12 or 14 people in them. So
And
even,
this
even the ones that would be the least popular, the most like luxury. So
Yeah, yeah. So it was just interesting to sort of note that. And there were a few, yeah, that were, busy like mine was. But in general, not as many as you would think were that big. And it could have just been, time of year. It could have been economy. It was in Los Angeles, which is a little bit more expensive than Las Vegas, which was last year. I think the economy has had a little bit of a downturn between last year and this year. So I think that might be part of it. I heard something interesting too, that some people will do like every 3 years of a conference. I'd never thought about that, because to me, I always went every year. But if it is like every 3 years, well, everybody was dying to get out of the house. So last year was a big one. And maybe we'll have a year or two that might be smaller and then it might grow again. I don't know. I don't know.
So I was looking up statistics because I know that during the pandemic, a lot of gyms closed.
Yep.
Many of the personal trainers I know were out of work. It was really a very, very rough time in the industry. And I was looking at, numbers, and roughly from 2019, which was the biggest income, at least according to this one statistics, that there's been in the fitness industry, they were down by roughly, even as of 2023, they're down about 10 to 15%,
Okay.
which is a lot, right? They're down a lot. And it's coming up like 2020, 2021, 2022, but now it's coming back. And as part of that, it's interesting. One thing that was on the top of everybody's list was wearable technologies and virtual stuff.
Yes.
So, virtual headsets and that kind of thing for we type training, using technology, all the apps and the phones and the watches and things that can track your stats. All those things seem to be really a high point on there. And none of that really relates to education or to training or even to necessarily working with somebody, right? All
Right.
those are kind of things you do on your own. So there seemed to be an increase in on your own fitness as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to in a group or in a class fitness.
Now, let me ask you this. What do you think is driving that? Could it be, and part of me does come back to the economy a lot, because I'm just going to go back when we first had the housing, crash.
Bubble, yeah,
What happened with the fitness industry is the rise of the boot camp, the rise
yeah,
of classes outdoors that cost
yeah,
very little money. You could take a
yeah.
class for $10 and someone's going to yell at you and make you do a lot of push-ups and jumping jacks and all that kind of stuff. And you create a culture around that, and it worked. And that was very big for a number of years, a number of years. And, in a lot of areas, you didn't have to worry about weather, so it could be done closer to year round. In our area here on the East Coast, part of the year, obviously, you're going to have weather, you're going to have this and that. But I noticed that every time we had an economic downturn, group exercise would go up, things that you had to pay less money for. So you're getting almost, you'd think, more bang for your buck, because, to spend, instead of $1,000 a month in personal training, you're now spending $100, and you feel like you're getting a lot out of it, but you're not getting that one-on-one attention. You're not getting the customization. You're just getting, here's a stamp. You're going to do the same thing as everybody else. So I didn't know if it was an economic or if it was more along the lines of people just got used to doing it in their homes and they wanted to stay there.
I've got to assume it's both. I mean, people discovered during the pandemic, and there are so many resources for doing it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of workout trackers. There's all kinds of programs that you can get online that will give you a basic outline of what you want to do. Although a lot of that online training, the virtual training, has really gone down
Mm-hmm.
in terms of popularity. I mean, Peloton's rise and fall is kind of a classic version of that. But the other thing too that's coming up a lot is that Gen Z and Gen X, like the people coming up, 20s, 30s, 40s, are much more interested in fitness
Mm-hmm.
than the older generations were. Certainly at that point, they're all, statistically much more committed to fitness. And a lot of times, like I know in my 20s, I couldn't afford a personal trainer to save my life, right? I had to find a cheaper way to work out. And so I think that's some of it. I think some of that is driving the less expensive stuff. And also, I mean, not to find a point on it, when you're younger, you can do whatever somebody tells you to do
Yeah.
and not necessarily have negative impacts from that, right?
Yep.
You can go to a group class and generally do fine and feel better and whatever. As you get older and have other issues, you need a little more customization often.
Yeah. And a couple of things that I noticed in the last couple of years. Yes, the rise and fall of Peloton, of the Mirror, of, the Tonal, all these home gyms where you can look inside of it and it's got basically a television behind the mirror that's going to tell you what to do. Some of them are mixed in with group exercise classes like a Peloton. So you get whether it's you need to have a little competition or you just need the
Yeah.
culture and you
Yeah.
like to be around with other people, even though you're not with other people, but you have the feeling that you are because everybody's doing something. So you have a little bit of that going as well. And I think that has something to do with it. But I think what I saw was my wealthier clients were the ones that were buying that because let's face it, for a Peloton, the machine itself was, you're going to spend a couple grand. You're going to then spend the monthly, what was it, $40, $50 a month every month to do the classes. And if you are dedicated, your husband, he's a cyclist. Peloton might be something that he would do 3-4 days a week. He'd do it because he can. He loves to cycle. Whereas the average person, is it cheaper than a gym membership? Maybe. It depends on the gym you go to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a big outlay. So I found my wealthier clients were the ones buying it. And then there was the monthly fee. And I found that they were very disappointed after a period of time. Everybody has the initial, yay, fun. And then after 6 months or so, it's the same workout. It's the same thing over and over again. And either they're getting injured or they're not progressing or something, they just lose interest. But you do see the downturn.
Well, and I think that's exactly what's happened. I mean, and I know, our experience in the Pilates industry is that people are, for the most part, really happy to be coming back to live events, to live classes, to seeing people. Because, working out in your living room, not everybody wants to sit there by themselves watching whatever they're watching on TV and working out. Like that
Yep.
just isn't everybody's cup of tea. For many of us, motivation comes from seeing your buddies at the gym, having a chat with so-and-so after class, having a teacher who actually looks at you and says, how you doing, and sees you and knows who you are,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just being, number 732 on the screen.
Yep.
So I think that desire to be in community and to exercise as a group is strong for people. People like to do stuff together. And I think that's why a lot of the online stuff has faded and a lot of the in-person stuff is coming back.
I think the online stuff, there's still a big push because we know a number of
Hmm.
people who have gone to work for Apple Fitness.
Yeah.
And they may
Yep.
not be
Yep.
the person in front of the camera, but they're doing a lot of the programming behind the scenes and creating
Yep.
things and, doing the marketing and all of that. So there's still a huge push from the companies to push for that. And they're getting some top name people to be as part of the company. Because like I say, we know some of these people and, I'd consider them top notch teachers
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
and instructors. So there's still a push there. And I don't know if it's just, look, we've invested all this money and we think that it's still going to do that. It's still going to make us a lot of money. I think much like, I don't know if you did this, but during the pandemic, I think everybody, bought every single subscription service that there was because we needed to be entertained
Yes.
24 hours a day. So we had all of our subscriptions. But
Yes.
then now that we're back in the real world, we're looking at it going, when's the last time you watched this? When's the last time you did this? And I think, unlike a gym membership, which let's face it, so many people had a gym membership, they go from January to mid-February, and then they forget about it, and then maybe they'll go before summertime to get summer buff, and for 2 weeks they're really dedicated, and then they forget. But they pay the entire year because gyms make it very difficult to quit. And also they say,
Yeah,
well, no problem. Just know when you start up again, you're going to have to pay that initiation fee of $800 million
exactly.
dollars.
Yeah,
That it's a deterrent,
yeah,
and that deterrent keeps people paying that monthly fee. Whereas I think it's a lot easier to go online and say, you know what, I haven't used my Peloton in the last month. I'm just going to freeze my membership and not pay. And maybe they'll never go
yep,
back.
yep.
It becomes easier to turn that off than it does a gym membership.
And people have less time. I mean, that's the other thing I'm
Yeah.
really seeing. It's like even just talking to, all the instructors and educators that I know, I used to be able to pretty much get a call with them whenever I needed to. I just call them up and say, hey, let's set up something.
Yep.
And now it's like, oh, I'm busy until next Wednesday, or I've got a short opening next Friday. So everybody's busier. Like,
Uh-huh.
people are coming back and people have their lives back. And because of that too, there's just less time. I mean,
Yep.
before, if you're working at home and you're stuck at home, which we were for months out here in California, especially, you got to find stuff to do. So you take, okay, I'm going to do an hour class during lunch. I'm going to do 20 minutes in my afternoon break. Now you're running around. You don't have the same time to do that. So
Yeah.
I think there's also that component.
I'm curious too as to people's percentage of virtual for instructors like myself, like yourself,
Hmm.
who, if we're teaching, I see, 6 to 7 people a day. And I'd say virtual versus in person, I'm still seeing 30% virtual, between 25 to
Okay.
30%. Part of the reason is because they moved. They went from
Right.
Washington, they could afford, and for tax purposes, they moved to Florida. And I have a number of people who did that and sold the properties here, moved down there, and I'm still seeing them multiple times a week, once, 3 times a week,
Hmm.
whatever it is. And we do it virtually, and it works out fine. I've known their bodies for years, so that's not an issue. So we do see people all over the world that we can do that with. Uh, but I do wonder if I took away the people who if I took only the people who lived locally, I'd probably be down to less than 10% because people want to come back in. And I'm curious how many people, instructors, personal trainers, what percentage of them are still doing virtual versus in person? Are you finding any change in that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have no strong statistics. I have a lot of people that I've talked to individually who've told me their stories.
Right.
But I'd say a whole lot of them were like you, where once they opened their studio again, everybody who could came back,
Yep.
or a lot of people who could came back, and more people came in. All the studios I know are busy as can be.
Yep.
The Pilates studios I know are busy as can be. Um, but many of them, just like you, their clients moved, but their clients still want to see them. So a lot of the people that I know that are still doing virtual are in your situation, where they're essentially still seeing clients they saw before the pandemic who now live somewhere far away. Or for many of my instructors who travel internationally and teach internationally, they now have access to training people in Korea, or
Yep.
training people in India, or training people in South America. So that opportunity just to train people they wouldn't have the access to before, because they couldn't see them in person.
Yeah, I've got a couple of
So
people
those are
from
the
the
two things
UK.
that I see.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That, we
yeah,
just had, you match up the 5 hour time difference and it's like, okay, we can do this. And
yep,
it works out because whether they're in the next room or they're across the world, doesn't matter. I mean,
right.
you're 2,500 miles away, but we're staring at each other on a
We're
screen.
talking.
So we're talking and we do this all the time. So
Not a problem.
yeah, so I think technology has improved in that sense. And it's made the
Hmm.
world smaller in that sense that we can reach out and work with people at a distance. But I think you're right. I think people want to come back in person. Uh, in our facility, I can't tell you how busy we've gotten. We've gotten more assessment requests to the point that we're nearly turning people away. And my thing is never turn anybody away. But I also am like, I don't know where I'm going to put anybody. But I still say, sure, we can take in. I'm like, I'm not sure how, but I want to be able to help everybody. And, people are ready to come back.
People, I think, are not only ready to come back. I think a lot of people, and I've heard this from instructors and from clients and from people in the industry. I think people also realized during COVID that health was really important,
Yes.
you know,
Yep.
and the staying healthy was really going to keep them going for the rest of their life, whatever that is for them. And so I feel like a lot of people got re-inspired to take their
Mm.
health seriously after COVID, and to really just do that. Say, hey, I got to take care of myself because I want to live to be 112, and I want to be able to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think we also, because I do medical exercise, I saw a number of people get injured during the pandemic because they went from being completely sedentary and doing nothing for 2 years and suddenly more aches, pains, and all that kind of stuff. And then their doctor's like, you know what, you really need help not doing it on your own. So they get sent to me, which is great, good for business, and we can help out a lot of people. But I've seen a lot of that occur as well, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I find that
One of the things
interesting.
that I was thinking, yeah, one of the things I was thinking, again, looking at the trends and seeing what's popular and what people are saying is popular, is something that I think has changed a lot in you and I's practice lifetime. Is people are much more focused on in fitness. I think fitness and life have come closer together in the
Hmm.
sense of, I feel like fitness, both Pilates and fitness, from my perspective, we're like, okay, I'm going to do push-ups, I'm going to do pull-ups, or Pilates, I'm going to do a mat class, I'm going to do a reformer class. And that the whole idea of functional fitness, which has been around for quite a long time, has really taken a very strong place in our world.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really love to see, and I'm seeing this all through the Pilates world and some through the personal training world, is fitness and Pilates coming together, mind,
Oh,
body,
yeah.
and fitness coming together in all kinds of different ways. The whole mobility focus in fitness that we talked about, a couple times ago, like that is new. Personal trainers never talked about mobility when
Never.
they talked about stretching, maybe not. So I feel like the world has gotten better in the sense of sharing of information. Science has improved a lot in terms of what the trends are, what's good for the body, and all the many successful and effective ways to work out. There's not one thing that fits everybody. It's not all cardio. It's not all strength training. It's not all, you can do a lot of different things and be in good
Mm-hmm.
shape. I think that's a really nice positive trend that I've seen over the last many years, actually.
I think a lot of that comes to education.
Yeah.
I think the personal trainer and the Pilates instructor today is a little smarter or a little better educated. Let's not say smarter, a little better educated, or has more
Mm-hmm.
educational opportunities given to them
Yeah.
to learn
Yeah.
about the different styles. I also think that there are a lot of companies who, jump on either the strength and conditioning bandwagon and realized, hey, with these athletes, we've needed to do more mobility work, and they're doing that. And then they say, hey, well, why don't we transfer that into the general population? And then we
Mm-hmm.
suddenly start to see it in our world. Stick
Yeah.
mobility and all this kind of stuff. I look at a lot of that stuff and I'm like, oh, well, that's nothing new, but yet it is, because now it's not just the boutique places that are doing it. It's everywhere. You see it at gyms. You see all of the equipment. You're thinking, oh, wow, they're really dedicating a whole area to, more mobility training. And you see more people there. You see people actually doing it, not just, a couple of stretches and then they leave. It's actually a good portion of their workout. So it's interesting to see the transformation as they're being taught this, and it's becoming more in the general lexicon of fitness.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like the science of fitness has just changed wildly in the
Yeah.
last 30 years. Wildly. Um, our level of education is higher for many of us. Our level of education is higher. The science is much better than it ever was. There's a lot more interest in it. There's really been genuine progress
Hmm.
in terms of understanding how the body moves, what's valuable, all the different ways that can really make a body move better. It's interesting.
I think part of it, as you know, I've been doing post rehab medical work for pretty much my whole career. I do wonder, I was sort of on an island on my own. There were a few of us that did what
Mm-hmm.
I was doing, but not a lot. I mean, you were doing it in Pilates land. I was doing it
Yeah.
in fitness land. And it was great because I had a niche that no one else was touching.
Yep.
And then corrective exercise came along and started
Yep.
dipping its toe into sort of my world and your world. And
Yep.
it's like, okay, cool. And then people started realizing, hey, people are getting injured. How can we help these people? How can we make them better? And I think a lot of times trainers as well. I read this statistic that personal trainers are among the most injured athletes out there because they
Yeah.
overtrain, they train too
Yeah.
intensely, train too much.
Yep.
They want their
Yep.
body fat down to 0% and they want their muscles up to maximum all the time because they have to look good. It's not for
Yep.
performance necessarily as much as it's vanity.
Yep.
But there's a lot of body breakdowns. So these are the ones who are trying to cure themselves and trying to fix their own
Right.
bodies, and they're learning and realizing, oh, and then new technology and research like the fascial system. Okay, first time I heard about fascia, 15 years ago, maybe, and that's because I was a body worker, so I heard a little bit about this. And now it's all over the place. I still think it's at its infancy. I think we're still learning a lot. But I mean, every other class is mentioning fascia within their education. And that's great because it's something that we need to learn about and we can use to maximize our gains for our clients. So I think necessity of keeping ourselves healthy as an industry has brought education up and has opened its doors to learning more about things like fascia, learning more about mobility, going beyond 8 to 10 repetitions for, going beyond Joe Weider magazines and things like that. I think that it's really changed. I think the industry has changed that way.
It's changed a lot. The other thing I'd say there, and this was, again, one of the surveys I was looking at, most of the respondents, and this is, I think, true, and particularly in personal training, less in Pilates, that most of the trainers are between 20 and 30. Like most of the respondents were between 20 and 30.
Uh-huh.
And then it really trickles off after that. It's sort of a, 20, 30, 30, 40, 40, 50, et cetera. And I mean, you and I both know that when we were 20, we could do an awful lot and we could recover
Quickly.
quickly, right? Boom. It was like, oh, two days later, take a little aspirin, iso something, and I'm good to go. You hit your 40s, you hit your 50s, and that is no longer the case generally. Because again, especially if you're a personal trainer, you're a Pilates teacher, and you're working out as you did when you were 20 or 30,
Yep.
but you're now 40 or 50, your body goes, excuse me, do you sure you want to do that right now? And I feel like that's some of what's changed too, is that as the industry has grown up, we've discovered that we need that self-care, and that people need different things at different parts of the life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing that is clearly another trend is fitness for older adults.
Yes.
All right, it's been a trend for a long time, but it's really coming up there now. And that makes sense. It's like people get to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, et cetera. And they're like, hey, I want to keep going. I need to keep fit. And at that point, it takes work to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
When you're younger, it takes work to build. And then there's a period where it doesn't take a lot of work to maintain. And then there comes a point where it takes a lot of work just to maintain.
Yep.
And that's the point where a lot of people are at if they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, et cetera.
Yep,
So,
exactly. It's interesting you say that because as you were just saying, the industry is growing up. And I'm going to even say the industry is growing older because when I get together now at conferences, whether it be a Pilates on tour or it's an idea or it's just me doing workshops, I can see the average age of the instructors because chances are we're teaching instructors. We're not teaching general population. We're teaching instructors, you and I.
Yeah.
They're older.
Yeah.
They're not these buff bunnies that, are 20 years old now who, they can do anything they want. They're going to snap back, like you said. Their resiliency is incredible. But I'm seeing a lot more 40-year-olds, a lot more 50-year-olds in my classes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. I love that. I think back to 30 years ago when we first got into this industry, that people didn't think of this as a career the same way they do now, because there wasn't the same longevity.
Well, I would say too that I think something like the average personal trainer lasts for 3 years.
Yeah,
So there still is a huge drop off,
sure.
particularly in personal training, less in Pilates because just for a lot of reasons. But a lot of times people don't start Pilates quite so young as part of
Exactly.
it, you know. But personal training has been like a very, very short lifespan for most personal trainers. Most of them get out of it, they come out of college, they're excited, they work for 2 or 3 years, they realize they can't make a living they want, they go off to something else.
Yep.
And really, I think there's a few of us that stay in the industry for a long time. I suspect it's a relatively small percentage that really make a career of this, as opposed to a part-time gig or a sometime thing or a for a little while thing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, when you look at the industry in general, it's published or it used to be published every year, the average salary for a personal trainer.
Yeah,
That was for years $32,000. Now,
yeah,
of course, you have your New York City trainers, they're making six figures. Your Los Angeles, San Francisco, your big city ones. But in general, if you're thinking 32 to 36,000, that's nothing. And you can't afford to have a family of two kids, wife or husband. And, if both of you are bringing that in, you're middle to low income, you know?
Well, you're making more or less what you're making at McDonald's. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, you're making kind of retail wages
Yeah.
at $32,000 a year, or low paid retail wages, or
Yep.
fast food workers, or
Yep.
that kind of thing. You're not making a professional level salary at all.
Right.
Which is different in Pilates. Pilates tends to pay a whole lot better than that.
Yep.
Which is partly why, I mean, the Pilates industry is different on that front. Most people don't get into Pilates till a little bit later in their life.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be people who have already done Pilates for a while, or were like a dancer or a movement professional of some kind, and then decide maybe in their 20s, 30s, more likely 40s often, that they want a career change or they want to make this part of their career path. And so people come to it a little more seasoned, a little
Mm-hmm.
more preparing for it to be a career. And it's a huge investment.
Yeah.
I mean, the average, if you're going to be comprehensively trained as a Pilates teacher, it's going to cost you potentially $5,000, and that's just for the training.
Right.
You can become a personal trainer going through the ACE online exam for, I don't know what, $200 or something
Yep.
like that,
Yep.
and a weekend. So the commitment's much greater. And I think people who get into it, and again, a lot of people start and drop out, but those who really stick with it feel like they made a commitment. I mean, it takes 2 years to become even a halfway decent Pilates teacher for the most part. And at that point, you're committed. Like, well, if I put in this much time and effort, I'm going to keep going and keep working on it. So it's different, and you get paid better.
Yeah.
Pilates teachers get paid anywhere from 35 to $150 an hour, depending on what their work situation is.
Yeah.
And you can make a living at that.
You can.
On average.
What I found interesting since the pandemic, and I'm curious for the Pilates studio, because I know that Balanced Body, for instance, during the pandemic, you couldn't get a reformer. They were so back ordered. It was unbelievable because everybody wanted to purchase their own equipment, which was great for the business. But around here, where there used to be, I was one of the first people who left the gym and opened up my own studio.
Yeah.
And this was back in 99. I left the gym, told myself I'm going to do it. I'm going to either make it or break it. I'm going to figure this out and go for it. And you know what? Most personal trainers are not business people. We are trainers. And it took a while to
Yes.
figure out, but figured it out, made a successful living doing it. In the last, I'd say from 2010 to 2020, I saw an eruption of small studios in
Yeah.
this area. Now, I'm in a relatively affluent area. I was told at a young age, you know what? Set up your practice in an area where people can afford you. Makes sense.
Yep. Yep.
It makes sense. So, I'm in an affluent area, but I started seeing all these places pop up. And a few weeks ago, I just decided to take a walk, and I said, oh, there used to be a place there. It's not there. There used to be a place there. There used to be a place there. A lot of them have gone out of business. A lot have gone out of business. And could it be because of the pandemic? Possibly. It could just be that they decided to just go online because, hey, if I'm only doing online now and I don't have to pay a monthly, I only have to pay for Zoom. I don't have to pay for rent. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if in the Pilates world, we're seeing the same thing, that a lot of the smaller studios are closing down, or are people, only working out of their homes? Because I know that's pretty popular.
So yes, yes, some of that for sure. I mean, as you said, a lot of people in our industry are not good business people. That's just, we know that. That's been true forever. And many fitness businesses don't last very long because of that. They
Yeah.
just don't understand. And I've had many conversations with people wanting to start a business, and you start in the path of, have you thought about this? Have you thought about
Yep.
that? Have you thought, and the answer is basically no to all those things.
Yep.
So then you're kind of like, oh, you got to think about that because this is all going to cost you a lot more than you think.
Yep.
Um, but no, people have definitely left. A lot of studios have closed. A lot of teachers have done what personal trainers did, which was they're working at a studio. Particularly, they weren't a studio owner, but they're working at a studio,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a clientele, and they realized, oh, I could go home and make all this money myself
Yep.
instead of being paid as an employee or a contractor at a studio. So a lot of studios are hurting like mad for employees right now because those who are successful and entrepreneurial could just go home and start their own program, and just do it online, do it part-time, make 3 times what they're making before, and call it a success.
Right.
So that's for sure happening. But yeah, I don't think as many Pilates studios closed as fitness studios. It was
Mm-hmm.
my feeling from what I saw. They seem to keep going one way or the other. Again, a lot of them switched to virtual. They did all kinds of crazy stuff in terms of safety and masking and distancing and cleansing. There's a bunch of that going on for quite a while. So they would still have people in studio, but they would be highly protected. Um, and that got a lot of people through. But again, those are the committed studios that were successful already.
Right.
If you're on the edge, if you're at all on the edge, you went under.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of used equipment on the market because of that.
Yeah. I do wonder if a big part of it, like you said, if you're not a business person and you don't really understand that, you're working in a club and you're going to get 50% of whatever they're charging, and you're thinking, boy, they're ripping me off. They're taking half my money. Well,
Mm-hmm.
look around you. There's the equipment,
Mm-hmm.
there's the overhead, there's the
Mm-hmm.
rent, there's the
Mm-hmm.
lights, there's
Mm-hmm.
insurance, there's all these other things that until you're out on your own and you realize, oh, of this, $150 that I'm charging an hour, or $100 an hour, whatever I'm charging, I'm really, after tax and after everything else, I'm not doing that much better than I was in the club. And I think a lot of people realize that. So I do think you're right that after a year or two, a lot of places are closing down because they realize it's a tougher go. And I do think that online, we're seeing a lot of people still trying to hold on to that and still trying to see clients online because they can stay in an office. They can just stay in front of their computer. So that makes it a little easier for them. As from an educating point of view, because let's face it, you and I think we work great with clients, but I think, one of our passions is teaching and teaching instructors.
Yeah.
I think, Balanced Body, as well as some of the other big companies, did a wonderful job immediately transitioning to online. Now, I think everybody's still trying to figure that out because I don't think anybody's perfected it because nothing works perfectly every time. But Balanced Body did that 24 hours, of Pilates around the
Yeah.
world, which
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
crazy, but it was kooky and fun. And there's things like that happened that I think could only happen in a time when we are stuck at home. And
Yeah.
it made it brought the community together worldwide,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw that we were doing a ton of online seminars and they were doing great. We were getting 200, 300, 400 people sometimes. The numbers were staggering at times, but they've been dropping off
Yeah.
subsequently. And I know a lot of people who were teaching and going out on their, teaching, at all the conferences and things are doing less of that and more online teaching. And I'm sure their numbers are now coming down a little bit. Where do you see online virtual teaching going? Because, we've tried many different things, and can you really do reformer 1, reformer 2, reformer 3 online and do it successfully? Is that something that can be taught and done well? I don't know.
So this is my take on this. Having seen a lot of what our Pilates educators are doing and how they're doing it and how they're running their courses. And I'm going out on a limb a little bit here, but my feeling is there's a lot of things that you cannot teach successfully virtually.
Sure.
Um, two key things. One is there's a real difference in looking at a body on a screen. You see one view, right? I mean, maybe you can say, hey, would you mind turning around or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
would you mind changing your camera angle? But you've got to tell them to change their camera angle because you're going to see them from, wherever they are. It's two-dimensional, so it is a different view. And, if
Absolutely.
you've got a trained eye, you can see through the camera, which works great. But if you don't have a trained eye, you can't see through the camera as well, I think. Um, so you're never going to get that same experience of seeing a body moving in 3 dimensions in space, which is just, there's a lot of information there that you don't get on camera.
Absolutely.
I say at its best, it's about 70% of what you get at best.
At
And it can
best.
be like as little as zero,
Yep.
honestly. It can be as little as
Oh, yeah.
zero, but at best. And that's, a rough estimate that I'm making. So there's that. Then the second thing is, like, there's something about watching a whole bunch of bodies moving at once that you get in a class, you get in a group setting when you're teaching a bunch of people something, and having them all seeing what's happening around them and hearing what's happening around them. That's completely different. And you can't interact on Zoom.
No.
You know how it is on Zoom. You got this whole pile of faces staring at you, and you ask a question,
Blank stare.
and you wait for the answer, right? And everybody's kind of saying, is somebody else going to say something? Is somebody else going to say something?
Everyone's
Right?
waiting.
I mean, right. It's just awkward because if you're in a room, the body language would be clear.
Yes.
Right. If you're in a room with a group of people, especially if it's, let's say it's 20 people, you can tell who's going to say something. They kind of like something changes and everybody knows they're going to say something. And that's managed that way. And that can't be managed on Zoom. So from my perspective, I feel like there's the pros of online education, online fitness education, are accessibility. I mean, we've been able to reach people who are in markets with no Pilates, with very little Pilates,
Yep.
no good Pilates, that we would never be able to reach otherwise. People who can't move, can't travel because of family, work, finances, whatever.
Sure.
Right. So there's a real pro there, and that's a strong pro. The con is you're going to get the training. I think best case is about 70% is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And worst case could be literally zero. I mean, some people can't engage on screen.
Yep.
They're
Exactly.
spacing out. They're doing their nails. They're playing with. They're making dinner while they're in the middle of class.
Yep. I think we've all seen that from the
Yeah.
educator point of view. I was
Yeah.
teaching an anatomy in 3D online, which is difficult because I was the only person who had the clay and who had the model, and I'm teaching basically an anatomy course and showing it,
Which is hard anyway.
which is hard anyway.
Which, by the way, is challenging to keep people's occupied.
Exactly. And you could see people there, they would, mute their screen, find a mute, but then they turn their camera off. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, all right, you're getting CECs for this. I should really be able to see you. Now, okay,
Yeah.
bathroom breaks, I get. But half the class, I couldn't see them. And I'm thinking, all right, are they even paying attention? Are they checking their
Oh, yeah.
emails? I mean, how
Yeah,
many times
exactly.
have you been in a meeting with someone and you can tell
Yeah.
that they've checked out as you're talking to them because you can see them starting to read their email or something like that?
Right. Or you get an Instagram post from them while you're online with them.
Right.
That's my favorite. Right? You're going to notice if they just posted something on Instagram. You're like, you're in class with me. You should not be posting on Instagram. At least wait till like a break, because I know that you're just posting on Instagram.
Yes.
Right? And that happened the other day, and I was like, excuse me, Antonio, you don't get to post on Instagram while you're in class with me.
Yeah, I've had that happen. That is funny. That is funny.
Yeah. So, so absolutely, there's a different kind of attention, and not that everybody needs to be, I mean, you can space out in class in person just as well as you can space out in class, virtually, but it's really different. There's a very different kind of engagement
Well,
when you're in, you just feel more responsible to the situation.
I think the positive to it
Yeah.
is way back when, I don't know if you remember a time when if you wanted to take a course, being from Hawaii, it costs a lot of money to fly.
Yes.
But what we could get were VHS tapes. So you could take a
Yeah.
course on VHS and you'd take it,
Yeah.
you'd take the thing, you'd fill out, you'd do your worksheets, you'd send it in, you'd get, some credits for it. And at the end of the course, you'd get, ta-da, you get your CECs and you get called, something else and some letters behind your name. Fantastic. But I found that I got so bored
Yeah.
watching these. And now, granted,
I know.
not everybody's an entertainer. Not everybody can keep you engaged. I get that. However, it's still one of those things where you're talking about watching for a long period of time. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, what have I really learned with this? Because you are just watching, someone who's recorded this a long time ago, which again, some of them are fantastic. I just recorded a bunch for a couple of different organizations that are going to be part of their thing. I've done a bunch for Balanced Body, and those live on. You can take these hour-long courses and they're fun. We try and make them as educational and entertaining as possible. You and I have, we can do that. We know how to. Not everybody does, granted. But at least live, you're engaged. You have to be engaged. You can't pause real life, and let's face it, how many times has someone else asked a question that you're like, oh, what a great question. I wish I had thought of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're,
or they bring somebody up and go, hey, let's look at this. Let's talk about, this particular exercise or what's happening with this person's body or this posture. And you're like, oh, cool. That doesn't happen online.
No.
There's just a moment when you as a teacher walking around the room and go, here's a teaching moment. Everybody come around. Let's learn something here. Right? That doesn't happen online.
You've been teaching now almost an entire year the advanced movement principles at Pilates on Tour. Probably what, 5,
Right.
6 of them so far this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever taught the same class twice?
No.
No. Each one's
I'm
a little
not
bit different.
capable. I'm not capable, which is everybody knows that who's taught with me. I mean, yes, the content will be quite similar, but there's always some different insight that comes in the middle of class that you want to explore.
Absolutely.
Again, a question comes up or a body comes up or somebody brings up a case study and you're like, hey, interesting question. Let's go down that path, right? Let's go down that rabbit hole.
Exactly.
And see what's there.
And you're not going to get that
That's the nature of interaction.
Right.
No.
Exactly. And online, especially through recording, you can't do those. Now, we tell stories, and the stories are great, and the stories can get through a lot of that, but it's not like the spontaneousness of having someone who has, severe whatever, rheumatoid arthritis, scoliosis, someone like that is in the class, and you're like, oh, wow, well, let's take a look at this, because this is something we don't see every day. Right.
Right.
It is a whole new experience. And that's kind of neat. And you also get different, small groups, and you'll get different energies from the groups, and those people will come up with different questions, and they'll be learning from each other.
Yeah, that's the other thing. That's what's really missing in Zoom too.
Yeah.
And even in a breakout room, because half the time you send them into a breakout room and they may start teaching and then they just start chatting.
Yes.
Which they wouldn't, I mean, they can do that in live, but they're less likely to.
Yep.
If they know you're watching them, they're going to stay on task.
Yep.
Whereas you send them off to a breakout room where it's, just the two of them on screen, and they feel like socially they should interact face to face. They shouldn't necessarily be doing, okay, let's just, go do the task. It's not what they're interested in.
Yep. I totally agree. So bringing this back around, let's look in our crystal ball. Okay, let's put our little Swami hats on. We'll be Karnak here and see if we have that. No, that's that's aging me right there.
Throwback, Brian. That's a serious throwback.
Yeah, that's a throwback. We just lost half of the people. What? But let's take a look in the future, and 2-3 years from now.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to be popular in fitness? Because the thing I noticed that was most popular right now was the cheap, what you could buy for $100 to $200, which, years ago it was the TRX. That was $279. And that was portable and the Bosu, all that kind of stuff. They were inexpensive. You could buy one and it enhanced your practice. So that was really popular this year. Okay, the spine fitter was
That
really big.
that is a major trend just generally. Again, reading through all the things, they talked a lot about even boutique fitness places
Mm-hmm.
spend very little money on equipment.
Yeah.
And almost all they buy are small accessories. So, weights, medicine balls, bands, rollers, you know, TRX, Viper. That's kind of what a lot of particularly the boutique fitnesses are going for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so I think that's still going to remain popular.
Yep.
I think in looking at it from an educational standpoint, do you think that 3 to 5 years from now we're going to see as much virtual teaching as we're seeing now and seminars and things like that? Do you think it's going to revert to 80 to 90% live, or do you think it's going to remain 60-40 live versus virtual?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, given what we've seen in terms of online education and kind of this general decline in
Mm-hmm.
numbers for online education because people have other options, um, I think there will always be a place for online education, whether it's live or pre-recorded.
Mm-hmm.
I think honestly, video has gotten cheap enough and easy enough to manipulate
Sure.
that it's pretty easy now to make a course. It used to cost like thousands of dollars to get a video recorded, edited, etc. Like it cost a huge amount of money. It's a big barrier.
Yep.
People can now do it on their phones if they're
Yeah.
even remotely savvy. We look at YouTube and podcasting and things like that. There's a lot of ability to do that.
Yep.
So I think that will always be part of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think the younger generation is much more adept and used to seeing things on a
yes.
screen too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think that whole trend of virtual reality in terms of fitness, in terms of connected fitness, in terms of all that, I think that will just grow, and I think that will mean more online stuff. I also feel like people are getting, um, like with anything, I feel like during the pandemic it was, well, I just want to do something, so I'll do something. And now I think it's people are going to look for quality. So people who do good stuff, like the Apple Watch and their whole fitness thing is high quality. I think those people will remain and grow and be a consistent part. And I think other things will fall off. I think in terms of Pilates education, I know our particular stand at Balanced Body is we want to increase accessibility for things like mat, and we really want to emphasize in person for things that involve equipment because it's
Mm-hmm.
just really complicated and not always safe to do stuff without supervision, without actual on-site supervision for those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I
I
think it'll always be a mix.
Yeah, I think the same. I'm looking forward to, like I say, 3 to 5 years from now, conferences, because I remember there's a course I took when I was a baby instructor and I wanted to go out and teach at conferences. And there was actually a course that they had 3 top instructors who were, what do you have to offer? What, do you think you can teach too? And all this kind of stuff. And I took the course and I do remember the people that were in it. I'm the only person that really came out of that, that I can remember. And it was very interesting what someone had said. I think Shannon, said this, had Shannon Fable said, if you wanted to teach, there is between a conference, a fitness conference, Pilates conference, a weekend workshop, strength and conditioning. There's something every single weekend of the year. If you wanted to, you could literally be on the road and teaching almost every single weekend of the year. And that was very true because I'd get emails from all these other companies. And companies like Perform Better and Power Systems were putting on 2 or 3
Yeah.
days events and things in order to sell their equipment and, sell their books and all this kind of stuff. We're not seeing that. We're seeing a couple of small
They
boutique.
all died during the pandemic, didn't they?
Yeah. And there's a
I mean,
couple of,
every fitness conference and every Pilates conference too, aside from Pilates on Tour, all crashed during
exactly.
the pandemic, pretty much.
Exactly. And the ones that are coming back
Yeah.
out, I've been contacted by a couple of them. And their whole thing is, well, we can't pay you. So you can
Yeah,
come and
exactly.
teach. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, thanks, but I'm
I don't need to do that. At this point in my career, I don't need to do that.
exactly. I've done my charity work. It's time for me to
Yeah,
get paid for teaching, and
yeah.
I respect that. And they respected it and everything. But yeah, you're not seeing as many of these conferences. You're not seeing, and maybe the cream will rise to the crop, and the ones that we are seeing will be the best of the best. And we can hope for that instead of having 20 conferences a year of varying, shapes, sizes, and educational levels. We'll see 3 or 4 that are high quality. I heard that idea, just announced that they're teaming up with ACSM to combine their conference, their winter conference. So Personal Training Institute and the Health and Fitness conference from ACSM are going to combine in February, and it's going to be a single one in Chicago, which, are you kidding me? Chicago in February? Oh my gosh.
February. Oh, yeah.
But okay, we'll bundle up, we'll have fun. But I think we're going to see a lot more synergy within companies too, as they're trying to keep their costs down, but be able to bring education to the masses.
Well, I certainly the whole trade show. I mean, every trade show we've been to this year has been down
Yeah,
substantially from
significantly.
pre-pandemic times, and I think there was we always had this phrase trade shows are like vitamins. You just think you have to take them. You think you have to go, even if you're not sure they're doing any good.
Yeah,
Right? That was kind of the phrase we used. And it was just a thing, like people you go to a trade show, you show up. Even though, for example, when Balanced Body goes to URSA, I'm not sure we've made any contacts at URSA worth having for the last 20 years that I've been at Balanced Body.
really.
I'm really not convinced we have. Um, and I think maybe people came away from the pandemic and found other ways to connect with their customers. I mean, they either crashed, they found other ways to connect with their customers that are much lower cost,
Right.
that are much more direct, and probably much more effective. So, I kind of feel like trade shows are and will continue to go through pretty radical reformation. NESM still doesn't have a live conference,
Yeah.
right? And then ACSM and PTI and Idea Personal Trainer are coming together. SCW, I think Sarah City is back.
So SCW is happening,
Sort
but
of.
they're very few and they're very small.
Right. So I think it'll be really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of rebuilding to do in this industry.
Yeah.
And there's also, people in the industry are hurting from 3 years of low income.
Right.
I mean, gyms are hurting, boutique fitness is hurting, instructors, had to find other careers. So this may be like, if talking 3 to 5 years, it may be 5 years before we even begin to approach some of the numbers we had before, if we ever do.
Right. Right.
I think it's going to be a while. I think it's going to be a while before we get there.
I think it's going to come
Everybody.
back because I've seen so much cyclical growth
Yeah.
in fitness. And a lot of times it does go with the economy. The economy starts to tank. People don't do personal training as much. Personal trainers find other
Right.
careers and it goes down and then it comes back up as times get better.
Right.
So
right.
I think we're going to see it come back. And I think there will be a time when it's going to be bigger than it is today and hopefully rivaling what it was at one time, because the population's only getting older and we need fitness without a doubt.
Well, and the younger generation is more excited about fitness than the older generations have been.
Right.
That's the other thing. So there's a lot of drive from the bottom here, drive from the younger people to really grow fitness also.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe in different ways, but I think we'll also see it coming from that direction as well.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
Well, we'll still be there, so we'll get to see what happens.
Exactly. We'll be around. We'll be here. We'll be out teaching. We'll be on the road.
We'll see what's going on.
So thank you very much. Like I said, I just wanted to go through, what you thought the industry was, where it was going, because I had a unique experience, being at something that was at one time so big, and the culmination that every year we looked forward to going to Idea World because it was this big thing and the trade show was so huge. And, it took you 2 days to get through the entire trade show because you had to make sure you saw everything. And now after 30 minutes, you're like, oh, I'm done. Okay. And there's nothing that really brought me back over and over again to ask a lot of questions. So it is, like I say, I wanted to see where your point of view was. And like I say, I have high hopes for the industry. And as long as there's people like us who are still out there, you know, waving the banner and
Pushing.
pushing and teaching, I think we're
Pushing.
gonna keep this alive. Any last thoughts you wanna cover before we?
I think that one thing that occurred to me earlier when you were talking, and it just reoccurred to me again, was um, innovation, right? Innovation
Mm,
in fitness, whether it's programming, whether it's products, whether it's delivery systems. I feel like we're actually in a pretty big time of transition there. Like, I think you
mm-hmm.
didn't see a lot of innovation at Idea World because the fitness industry was not growing for those previous years. I think it'll be just interesting to see where we all go. I think there's a lot of great new science out there, great new research out there, great new programmings involving fascia and functional movement, and how we really train the body for resiliency and biohacking. And there's a lot of really cool stuff happening, and I really look forward to that being incorporated into fitness and creating some really innovative solutions for more people to participate, more people to get involved, and really all of us to just get healthier and better.
Yeah, you just said something that I think where the industry is going to be going. I think technology is always going to have a place, and we saw some biohacking where people were, breaking things down, and you measure this and you do that. Okay, you know, I'm sure there's some science behind it, but the thing that you and I always come back to is functional movement.
Yeah.
It's movement, and I think people are coming to it a lot more. I think people are realizing that, hey, move, move more, move better. You know,
Exactly.
if you do that,
Yeah.
guess what? You stay healthier.
Yep. Your life
So,
quality is better.
yeah, and I think that is some place that we're heading toward, hopefully, because I'm seeing more functional. I'm seeing more things that are about functional movement patterns and things like that. So, hopefully, we'll see even more.
Yeah, exactly. One last little thing. I know we're going a little over, I think, but um, one of the things that I think is really a beautiful thing to see through this whole progression of the last many years in fitness is we've stopped looking at the body as pieces and
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at the body as a whole. I think fascia was a big part of that, the understanding of my fascia meridians and all that functional movement, really understanding the coordination and the integration of the body through movement. And that's really what we want to train because that's actually how we work. I think that has been a wonderful improvement in our thought process, in our theoretical background to all the movement that we do. And I just look forward to that growing.
Absolutely. That is a that is an awesome place for us to wrap this up because I think that's where we are moving and, that's what we focus on. So I love it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. You can always hit us on our socials at Moving Convos is our Instagram. Uh, Moving Conversations Live. If you are interested in Nora and I coming and speaking at your facility or coming to your area, we can work together to build a little workshop, a 2-day workshop that we can have a whole lot of fun talking about all these different concepts and movement and rehab and all of the above. Um, for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.